127 hours. Between a rock and a hard place. Act 1. The moment everything changes. April 26, 2003. 2:45 p.m. Blue John Canyon, Utah. Aron Ralston descends into the slot canyon. 27 years old. Mechanical engineer. Climber. Alone. The walls narrow. 3 feet wide in places. Smooth sandstone carved by water over millennia. Beautiful. Remote. Deadly. He climbs down from a suspended boulder. A chalkstone wedged between the canyon walls. The boulder shifts. It shouldn't, but it does. First his left hand. Smashed. Then his right. Crushed between 800 pounds of rock and the canyon wall. The impact is instantaneous. The pain is beyond description. Aron tries to pull free. His hand doesn't move. Not an inch. Not a millimeter. He's trapped. 100 feet below the desert surface. 20 miles from the nearest paved road. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody knows he's here. Nobody is coming. In his backpack, 2 burritos. 350 milliliters of water. A cheap multi-tool with a dull knife. A video camera. And time. 127 hours of it stretching ahead like an impossible equation with no solution. This is the story of a man who made every mistake you're not supposed to make in the wilderness. And then made the one decision that saved his life. A decision so brutal, so unimaginable, that most of us would rather die than consider it. But Aron Ralston didn't die. And what happened in those 127 hours will force you to ask yourself a question you've probably never had to answer. What would you sacrifice to live? Act 2. The man who didn't tell anyone. To understand how Aron ended up trapped in Blue John Canyon, you need to understand who he was before the boulder fell. Born October 27, 1975, in Marion, Ohio, Ralston moved to Denver, Colorado at age 12. The mountains changed him. Skiing, backpacking, climbing. He attended Carnegie Mellon University, earning degrees in mechanical engineering and French, with a minor in piano. I was an engineer before I ever took my first course in engineering in college, he later said. It's more of a mindset, and I'm still an engineer in my mindset. After graduation, Ralston worked as a mechanical engineer with Intel in Chandler, Tacoma, and Albuquerque for 5 years, but felt burnt out from working at a large corporation. So in 2002, he quit, walked away from stability, moved to Aspen, Colorado with a singular obsession, to climb all of Colorado's 14ers, peaks over 14,000 feet, of which there are 59 total, solo during winter, a feat that had never before been recorded. His mother used to tell him he didn't have a lot of common sense. But Aron didn't see it that way. He thought of himself as a problem solver, accustomed to brainstorming, gathering information, prioritizing and executing a solution. That analytical mindset made him fearless, maybe too fearless. In February 2003, just 2 months before Blue John Canyon, Ralston was caught in a grade 5 avalanche on Resolution Peak, Colorado with his skiing partners. Buried up to his neck in snow, one friend dug him out, and together they rescued the third friend. It was horrible. It should have killed us, Ralston later said. A severe avalanche warning had been issued that day. If Ralston and his friends had seen that before climbing the mountain, they could have avoided the dangerous situation altogether. Most climbers would have taken a step back, reassessed their approach to risk. Aron did the opposite. His friends didn't speak to him in the aftermath. But that didn't stop him. On April 25, 2003, Aron Ralston traveled to southeastern Utah to explore Canyonlands National Park. He slept in his truck that night, and at 9:15 a.m. the next morning, a beautiful sunny Saturday, he rode his bicycle 15 miles to Blue John Canyon, an 11-mile-long gorge that in some places measures just 3 feet wide. Ralston had not informed anyone of his hiking plans, nor did he have any way to call for help. This is the mistake that almost killed him. The basic rule of wilderness survival. Tell someone where you're going. He didn't, and now, at 2:45 p.m., with his hand crushed beneath a boulder in a slot canyon no one knows he's exploring, that mistake becomes his death sentence. Act 3. The first 72 hours. Saturday afternoon, The adrenaline is still coursing. Aron tries everything, pulling, twisting, wrenching his arm with all his strength. The boulder doesn't budge, not microscopically. He tries to create a pulley system with his climbing gear to lift the rock. Moving it a few millimeters would be enough to get his arm out. Nothing works. He begins chipping at the boulder with his cheap multi-tool. The blade is less than 2 inches long. The boulder is sandstone, but dense. He scrapes for hours. By nightfall, he's made a small divot. Meaningless. The temperature drops into the low 40s. He shivers violently. His body, compressed against the rock, can't move enough to generate heat. He rations his water carefully. 350 milliliters, maybe 12 ounces. In the desert, you need a gallon of water a day. He has enough for maybe a day and a half if he's careful. Sunday, day 2. Aron continues chipping at the boulder. On Monday morning, he tried again to move the rock with the ropes, then scraped for 15 hours straight. His hand has no sensation now, no circulation. The flesh is beginning to change color. At one point, he panics after quickly drinking a third of his water supply. He talks to himself, "Calm down. You will kill yourself with this behavior." "I didn't panic again until the end," he would later say. This is the engineer's mind taking over. The analytical, rational, problem-solving person. Being able to plan for the future and come up with contingencies and have margins of safety. But by Tuesday, day 4, a terrible realization sets in. After 3 days of trying to lift and break the boulder, the dehydrated and delirious Ralston prepared to amputate his trapped arm at a point on the mid-forearm in order to escape. He pulls out his knife, makes exploratory cuts into his forearm. Superficial. Testing. Then he hits bone. The radius. The ulna. He realized on the 4th day that in order to free his arm he would have to cut through the bones in it. But the tools available were insufficient to do so. The knife can't cut through bone. It's too dull. Too cheap. It was a cheap version from Leatherman knives. Plus it was less than 4 centimeters. Ralston later said, "It was not a Leatherman but what you'd get if you bought a $15 flashlight and got a free multi-use tool." He abandons the attempt. Not yet. He's not desperate enough yet. Act 4. The videos nobody was supposed to see. Wednesday, day 5. The food is gone. The water is gone. Ralston decided to drink his own urine. His arm has begun to decompose. The smell is overwhelming. The tissue is dying, turning black, liquefying. He carved his name, date of birth and presumed date of death into the sandstone canyon wall. RIP OC75 Aron, April 3rd. Then he pulls out his video camera. This is the moment that will change everything. Not because of what he says, because of what he doesn't say. My life had been about what I did. That was the first time it was about who I was. My choices were showing up as regrets. He later recounted. Every moment on that tape was a message to or about the people he loved. None of my accomplishments were on that tape. He records messages to his family, his mother, his father, his sister, his friends. What do you say when you know you're about to die? When this video will be found weeks later next to your decomposed body? Who would you say your goodbyes to and what would you say? Aron realized that life is all about loving relationships. Not the 14ers. Not the engineering degree. Not Intel or Aspen or the mountains he'd climbed alone. The people. Only the people. He did not expect to survive the night. But then something happens. Something he can't explain. As he attempted to stay warm, he began hallucinating. He describes having had a vision of himself playing with a future child while missing part of his right arm. A boy, maybe 3 years old, playing, laughing, and Aron, one-armed but alive, picking him up. The vision is so vivid, so real. Ralston credited his hallucination to giving him the belief that he would live. But how? Act 5. The Epiphany. Thursday morning, dawn of day 6. When he woke on the 6th day, he discovered his arm had begun to decompose due to lack of circulation, and he desperately felt the need to tear it off. He tries to pull, to rip the dead tissue away from his body, but it's still attached. Bones. tendons. And then, suddenly, Ralston had an epiphany. He could break his radius and ulna using torque against his trapped arm. The boulder isn't a prison. It's a lever. If he positions his body correctly, he can use the boulder itself to snap the bones. Once they're broken, the knife can cut through everything else. It was the catalyst to help me realize I could break the bones in my arm, he later said. He positions his body, takes a breath, then wrenches his arm against the boulder with all his remaining strength. The radius snaps. The sound echoes in the narrow canyon. He does it again. The ulna breaks. Afterward, I was euphoric, Ralston said. Now comes the hardest part. The painful process took an hour. He amputated his forearm with his multi-tool, using the dull 2-inch knife and pliers for the tougher tendons. The knife saws through dead flesh, through muscle, through nerves that still fire pain signals to a brain that can barely process what's happening. He used tubing from a camelback as a tourniquet, taking care to leave major arteries until last. Every few minutes, he has to stop, breathe, fight the urge to pass out. It's also miraculous that I didn't pass out while cutting off my arm. I probably wouldn't have gained consciousness, he later reflected. But he doesn't pass out. The engineer's mind stays focused, clinical, detached. And finally, after an hour of surgery performed with a $15 multi-tool in a slot canyon in Utah, his arm comes free. He's bleeding, weak, delirious, but he's free. Act 6. 7 miles to salvation. The ordeal isn't over, not even close. After freeing himself, Ralston climbed out of the slot canyon in which he had been trapped, rappelled down a 65-foot sheer wall, then hiked out of the canyon. Read that again. With one arm, after 5 days without food or water, after amputating his own limb, he rappelled down a 65-foot cliff and hiked 7 miles. Blinded by blood loss and weakened from days of ordeal, Ralston faced his final challenge, escaping the canyon. The desert sun beats down. Every step is agony. He's lost so much blood, so much weight, but the vision keeps him moving. The boy from the hallucination, playing, laughing, alive. However, after 6 miles of hiking, he encountered a family on vacation from the Netherlands. Eric and Monique Meyer and their son Andy, who gave him food and water and hurried to alert the authorities. Imagine being that family, hiking through a Utah canyon on vacation, and suddenly this figure appears, emaciated, covered in blood and dirt, one arm missing below the elbow. While the Dutch mother and her son went to get help, the father stayed with Ralston waiting for the rescue team. Rescuers searching for Ralston, alerted by his family that he was missing, had narrowed the search down to canyonlands, and he was picked up by a helicopter in a wide area of the canyon. He was rescued approximately 4 hours after amputating his arm. By the time he arrived at the hospital, Ralston had lost 25% of his total blood volume and over 40 pounds. He should have been dead 10 times over. But he wasn't. Act 7. The arm that took 13 men to retrieve. 3 days later, park rangers returned to Blue John Canyon. According to television presenter Tom Brokaw, it took 13 men, a winch and a hydraulic jack to move the boulder so that Ralston's arm could be removed. 13 men, professional rangers with proper equipment. An hour of work. And Aron thought he could move it with rope and a multi-tool. His arm was then cremated and its ashes given to Ralston. 6 months later, on his 28th birthday, he returned to the accident scene with Brokaw and a camera crew to film a Dateline NBC special about the accident in which he scattered the ashes of his arm there, where he said they belong. After scattering the ashes, he set about removing the inscription he had carved when he was near death. RIP 75 Aron, April 3rd. The epitaph was no longer true. He was alive. Act 8. The movie that made people faint. The story exploded across global media. On July 21, 2003, Ralston appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman, and his story was featured by GQ's Men of the Year and Vanity Fair's People of 2003. In September 2004, Ralston documented his experience in an autobiographical book titled Between a Rock and a Hard Place, published by Atria Books. It rose to number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. But the story was too cinematic to remain just a book. British film director Danny Boyle directed the film 127 Hours about Ralston's accident. Filming took place in March and April 2010, with a release in New York City and Los Angeles on November 5, 2010. Actor James Franco played the role of Ralston. The movie received standing ovations at both the Telluride Film Festival and the Toronto International Film Festival. Some of the audience members in Toronto fainted during the final amputation scene. The film received widespread acclaim by critics. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes reports that 93% of 239 critics have given the film a positive review, with an average rating of August 2, 10. At the 83rd Academy Awards in 2011, the film was nominated for 6 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Franco. Ralston himself said the film was so factually accurate it is as close to a documentary as you can get and still be a drama. What's compelling, Ralston believes, isn't the actual self-amputation, but the motivation to do so, and the deep reach of his desire to live. This is what separates Aron's story from typical survival narratives. It's not about courage. It's not about heroism. Ralston doesn't believe words such as courageous or heroic apply to him. I was in an extraordinary circumstance, and it fundamentally came down to wanting to live and get back to my family. Act 9. The impossible becomes routine. Here's what most people don't know about Aron Ralston. He didn't stop climbing. After his recovery, he continued to climb mountains, including Aconcagua in 2005, and in 2008, Ojos del Salado in Chile and Monte Piscis in Argentina. In 2005, Ralston became the first person to climb all of the 59 ranked and/or named Colorado's 14ers solo in winter. The goal he set before the accident, he finished it with one arm. He designed his own prosthetic arm, a high-tech device. It is 3 arms, actually, with 8 different hands. One for climbing, one for daily life, one for ice climbing. It works quite well, he said. He considers himself fully recovered, enough that he can climb with the same proficiency he had prior to the accident. But something else changed, something deeper. He later noted that his survival after being trapped in the canyon had given him a sense of invincibility rather than humbleness. He lost friends to suicide and became depressed after his girlfriend broke up with him in 2006. He has since tried to shift his focus away from adventure-seeking for self-esteem purposes. The engineer who solved an impossible problem learned that not every problem can be solved by force of will. And the vision, the hallucination of the boy? On his digital camera's viewing screen, he pulled up a photo that represented his born-again life. A picture of Leo, his 9-month-old son. "I showed it to The Rock," Ralston said. "I said, look who is here now." The vision came true. Act 10. The gifts hidden inside trauma. Corporations paid him $15,000 to $37,000 for motivational speeches. He became a full-time speaker, traveling the world, sharing his story. But not everyone saw him as a hero. Aron Ralston has a death wish, one book reviewer concluded. By Ralston's own written account, he had nearly drowned, disturbed a bear, and stumbled into an avalanche on earlier adventures. Failure to leave word of his whereabouts in Utah, ignoring one of the most basic rules of hiking, drew sharp rebukes. To some, he was inspiring. To others, a cautionary tale of recklessness. Aron acknowledges both. "We all have our boulders. They can be a challenge or a blessing," he says. In everyday life, these boulders often show up as what he calls the 3Ds: death, depression, and disease. We can turn the trauma into a tragedy or a triumph. The gifts he received from 127 hours trapped in a canyon? First, clarity about what matters. My life had been about what I did. That was the first time it was about who I was. Second, the wisdom that you can't hold despair and gratitude at the same time. Third, there are greater spiritual energies than us in the world, and there are times when we connect with them. I want people to understand that this was a miracle. A person without water usually lasts 2 to 3 days. It's phenomenal that I survived 6 days. There was the euphoric feeling of being free and getting my life back again. Because of what happened, I understand what life is. Epilogue. The boulder that changed everything. April 26, 2003. 2:45 p.m. A boulder shifts. A hand is crushed. A man is trapped. 127 hours later, that man emerges, one arm lighter, but somehow more whole than before. The story seems impossible. Cutting off your own arm with a dull knife. Rappelling with one hand. Hiking 7 miles while bleeding out. Surviving 6 days on 12 ounces of water. But every detail is documented. Every moment is true. Blue John Canyon still exists. Slot canyons carved by water. Chalkstones wedged between walls. A work crew eventually removed the stone that had trapped Ralston's arm so that no one would suffer a similar fate. Since 2003, canyoneers have been lured to Blue John Canyon. Some have not been up to the challenge. An 80-year-old man trying to retrace Ralston's steps in August 2003 ended up in the hospital for 3 weeks. The canyon has become pilgrimage, proof that the impossible happened. Photographers have documented it. Time-lapse videos of the sun rising over the accident boulder. Footage of the slot from multiple trips, showing how it appears at different times of day. One artist even tattooed a drawing of the Ralston rock on his right forearm in the same spot that the rock had pinned Aron's own hand. The story has taken on mythic dimensions. The man who cut off his arm. The engineer who solved the unsolvable problem. The father who saw his son before the boy was even born. But strip away the mythology and what remains is simpler and more profound. A man made mistakes. He paid for them. And when faced with an impossible choice, die slowly or do the unthinkable, he chose life. Not heroically, not easily, but methodically, analytically, like an engineer solving a problem. For me, the most powerful part of Aron's story is simply his example. He faced his boulder alone, with an open mind, an open heart, and with a level of determination that was indomitable. I'm hopeful that people will see something inside of themselves, as well, Ralston says. Because here's the truth, we all have boulders. Not literal ones, not 800-pound rocks pinning us in canyons, but circumstances that trap us, situations that seem impossible. Moments where we have to choose between what's safe and what's necessary to survive. And in those moments, Aron Ralston's story offers a single, brutal lesson. The will to live is more powerful than any obstacle. Even when that obstacle is your own arm. Even when the only way forward is through unimaginable pain. Even when every rational thought says it's impossible. There is no force so powerful as the will to live. Aron Ralston is alive today. Father, husband, speaker, climber. He still goes into the wilderness, still challenges himself, still seeks the edge. But now he tells people where he's going. The boulder that trapped him is gone now, removed, destroyed. But the story remains, carved into sandstone, written in blood, filmed for millions. A reminder that the human spirit, when pushed to its absolute limit, is capable of things we can barely comprehend. 127 hours. One decision. A lifetime earned. And somewhere in southern Utah, in a slot canyon carved by water and time, the walls still echo with a question. What would you sacrifice to live?